Watch the video to learn more about China. In the 80s, China began to reform and open up. Ordinary people also began to do business. I have never seen such a boss yelling at the guests, "If you don't buy it, you will leave quickly." The person who said this was the real landlord in the village, and the Henry people were rich, so they were naturally confident. After all, his family has a tractor in the village, and with this means of transportation, he is the brightest cub in the village. Henry is a shrewd man. He buys the stones laid by the villagers for a few cents and sells them for more than $1 when he pulls them into the city. A few years ago, Henry spent 5,000 yuan to buy a beautiful daughter-in-law. He didn't ask for anything else. He just wanted to add a big fat boy to the family. But Ava's belly never bulged. Henry tried various methods, drinking herbs and seeing Chinese medicine, even praying to God and worshiping Buddha over time. The man who begged for a child put all the fault on his wife. He was angry when he saw Ava, a woman who couldn't give birth to a child, was worthless, and Ava, who had nothing to rely on, could only let him beat and scold. When working during the day, Scarlett, who had already given birth to 3 babies, went to the construction site to deliver food to her husband. She told many villagers that the price of stone was getting lower and lower, and the hard work for a few days was not enough for the family's expenses. Henry did not argue, just said that it was too cheap to go to the city to sell. Scarlett did not dare to fight with him, only shouted in the rear, "How can I have that ability? I can only give men more dolls. Obviously this is a squeeze." In their opinion, the value of a woman is to have children, and if she can't give birth, she will be scolded by thousands of people. So you can imagine what kind of life Ava lives every day. She's like a tireless old cow. The family's small shop and the farm work in the field are all handled by him. In addition, she has to endure her husband's cynicism, and in the long run, Ava has become silent. But she also has happy times only when she stays with Charlotte. Ava shows her true emotions. The handsome Charlotte is a veritable cultural person, but in that era, the scholar still has to bow to the rich man not long ago. Charlotte found Henry. He wants to plant some trees in the village for greening, although selling stones is fast, but it is not a long-term solution. Resources will always be used up one day. Henry does not understand these profound truths. He only knows that whoever has money has the right to speak in these years. The two of them don't talk to each other. Charlotte goes straight to the point. He wants to borrow a tractor to carry the saplings, but Henry is also a master who can't afford to lose. He makes it clear that he can pull the saplings, but he must work for the family to pay for the oil. Charlotte complained but nodded, yes, for the sake of her own cause. Since then, when Ava is working, there is an empathetic man around him, and after a long time of contact, Ava takes special care of Charlotte, not only giving him sugar water, but also delivering daily necessities in the store. This kind and simple woman deserves to be treated well, but the old ideas of the old society are deeply rooted in the hearts of the people, and I forgot to bring him a bowl of Chinese medicine at night. Although the smell is pungent, but Ava still drank it, and the man with a smile on his face eagerly ripped off his wife's clothes, but Ava came to menstruation. Henry angrily scolded, "Such an expensive medicine. How much did you drink? Why is your stomach so unhappy?" and then punched and kicked him. Ava was full of grievances, but there was nowhere to say. The village is noisy with gongs and drums. Firecrackers are ringing it. Turns out that there is a new daughter-in-law entering the door. Ava wants to integrate into this festive atmosphere, but her face is full of vicissitudes. She thinks that marriage may not be as good as she imagined. The woman who is sick and rushes to the hospital enters the temple and bows. As long as she has children, life can be better. This scene happened to be bumped into by Charlotte, who went up the hill to chop wood, and he told Ava that the dilapidated house was not a temple, but just an embankment left over from ancient times, and it was also a valuable monument. And he took Ava to visit the woods he had contracted. The woman with the sad face, seeing the lush saplings, only felt suddenly enlightened in her heart, and the two walked side by side. It seems that there is endless words, but this good mood disappears without a trace when I go home. Henry and Scarlett from the same village got involved. Ava had seen the two of them have an adulterous affair more than once, but he had no position to stop it, and afterwards, Henry made a promise to reward 2,000 yuan as long as she was pregnant with a child, and Scarlett left satisfied. Perhaps it was a bad thing, but Henry restrained himself at dinner in the evening, especially when he heard his sister say that his sister-in-law was working too hard and wanted to help. He shouted angrily at which little child could do heavy work, and tomorrow I asked Charlotte to help him, and it was this decision that changed the fate of the couple. Chosen Silky As if it can blow into people's hearts, Charlotte wields a hoe sweat like rain, and he euphemistically shows his intentions. In fact, he is looking at Ava's face before agreeing to help before he can respond to the heavy rain in the mountains. The two had to hide in the cave for a while. The man and woman who have a good impression of each other are finally together. After this incident, Ava is like a different person. She feels that there is hope in life. Even if she works at home, she can't stop being happy and addicted to digging treasure. And this object was indeed a treasure, indeed a traditalis dergulitat. That night, he invited the respected third master in the village, constantly commanding him to fry a few more good dishes, and he didn't forget to take the good wine in the store. After 3 rounds of drinking, he tentatively opened his mouth to ask. The slightly drunk old man talked endlessly about the legend of the city tower, but Henry only heard the most important information. The city tower is buried in the treasures left by the past dynasties. Hearing here, Henry smiled from ear to ear. If the fortune comes to stop it, he sent the third master away. He hugged Ava and muttered quietly, "Our hard life can be regarded as the end." The next morning, Henry began to spread the news in the village, which was tantamount to a windfall, and the men, women, and children of the village were like sparrows who wanted to dig up treasures, while the old people were afraid of the gods and tried every means to dissuade and argue. Everyone thought that Henry was qualified to judge as the leading big man in the village, but he didn't know that this was exactly what the cunning man wanted. He immediately made a decision to demolish the city tower and dig up the treasure in order to win a good fortune and also show respect for the gods. Everyone was ready to kill the pig. In worship, Henry was busy. His feet did not touch the ground, and his sister stood aside and seemed to have something to say. He sensed that his sister-in-law was not quite right recently, so he wanted to remind his brother, but how could a man in the eyes of money manage this? He was busy killing pigs and sacrificing, and after a while, the basin was full of pig blood. Ava couldn't smell the blood, and then he fell to the wall and vomited. Anyone who saw it was like a symptom of pregnancy after the sacrifice was fiddled. The group marched towards the temple. They pretended to worship the fairies devoutly, and with Henry's order, everyone began to dig for treasure. At this time, Charlotte stepped forward to dissuade that this is a national cultural relic, cannot be changed at will. If it is discovered, it is a felony, and told. Seeing this, the third master also scolded angrily, saying that it could not be spread outside, and now it is all shaken out. If the gods in the temple are alarmed, the whole village will suffer, but no one is willing to deal with them. The gold and silver mountains are in front of them, and only fools will not move. The men shouted slogans and raised shovels to dig the hole. Henry was like a commander-in-chief who kept pointing out the country. Ava also fell into a clean place. She unscrupulously helped Charlotte clean the house, laundry, and cooking. Didn't know that Charlotte was her husband after a long time of getting along. Ava had already secretly agreed, coupled with the recent physical abnormality. She understood that she might be pregnant with a child, so she put on the wine and food, ready to have a good talk with Charlotte. And Ava hugged the man she loved. She wanted to leave Henry and pursue a new life, but Charlotte was embarrassed. He quickly pushed away the whimsical woman. The two could only be a shady relationship. He never thought of marrying him. Charlotte was afraid of gossip, and even more afraid that Henry would trouble him. And after weighing it, he said that he was too poor to give Ava the life he wanted, and led the person out without waiting for him to answer. Ava could only return disappointed. And the people of the village, he had already seen that the contradiction between the two had spread to Henry, and the rumor had reached Henry's ears, and he knew that he had put on a green hat, and the other party was still a poor sour scholar with no money and power. Henry was so angry that his eyes were on fire, and he immediately took someone to cut down the sapling, and Charlotte, who rushed to hear the news, was so anxious that he jumped up and down the tree he had planted so hard. Why was it ruined by Ava to call her and shouted, "Marilyn, you happy when you dare to seduce other people's wives?" Nick Charlotte knew that he was at a loss, so he let it be disposed of. But Henry continued to cut down the tree without forgiveness. Charlotte felt sorry for his tree, so he knelt down and begged for mercy regardless of his face. Things were in trouble. Both of them were undignified. Thinking of this, Henry smiled. Thinking of this, Henry smiled and turned away. Ava couldn't help crying when she learned that her lover Charlotte did not have such determination. He was only in Charlotte to show that she go for just a phantom of nothingness. They agreed to accept the judgment of
fate, she wiped away her tears and walked home without looking back. Fortunately, Henry is still digging treasure in the city tower. The greedy man seems to go crazy just when the rainstorm hits. Everyone digs through the tunnel. Everyone cheers. It seems that the treasure is already within reach. The third master, who is watching silently, jumps out and makes trouble. He can't help but scold loudly if anyone moves the things left by. The ancestors wait for the sky to thunder and cut off the children and grandchildren and grandchildren, children and grandchildren. This poked Henry's sadness and anger. Treasure was not found and provoked a bad luck. Darn bewitchers fled luck to bad luck.
Henry stumbled home like a puppet who had lost his soul and happened to see Ava standing by the window. The man who was holding his stomach was angry. He couldn't help but say that he would go up and beat him. Ava was like gaining courage. She stood up suddenly and said firmly and calmly, "I am pregnant." Henry suddenly stopped moving. He looked shocked and then ecstatic. Who knew that Ava added again, "It's not yours." It's his. Henry thinks 5 thunderbolts. He's like a squid that has lost its seawater, struggling desperately on the shore. If his wife can conceive a child, it means that he can't do it, and the successive blows make Henry feel painful. He begged Ava to keep the child in his womb. Everything was fine. No one knew whose child it was as long as he kept the secret. He would still be a respected rich man. Thinking of this, he laughed and ran out. Henry wanted to tell everyone that he had a child, but before he could come out, the unstable building suddenly collapsed. Henry was buried with the treasure in his heart. After the turmoil, Ava finally regained his life. He didn't want to stay in this sad place. He and the child in his belly deserved a better life, so he left with his luggage. The spring breeze swept her face, the beautiful Ava, and ushered in the most beautiful season of life. The film was released in China in 1994, and the story mainly tells the rough life of Ava, a rural woman. In modern society, Ava is definitely worthy of the word excellent. She was born beautiful, kind, and not afraid of hardship, but these were not important back then. There was only one criterion for them to measure women, that is whether they could have children or how many could they have. But Ava had been married for a few years or had nothing. Henry, who had strong self-esteem, naturally would not admit that it was his own problem. So all the blame was taken by Ava. Not only the people in the village pointed fingers at him, but even he felt guilty as the value of a woman to have children. Watch his next thing. Put it today. A lot of people will scoff at it. Having a baby should be an elective and not compulsory. There are a lot of dink families these days. Aren't they all worthy? The answer is clearly not. The so-called value is to look at the individual's understanding. Like Henry, the people of Jay's village, they are ignorant. The cultural relics at the foot of the Great Wall are dug up by this group of people. They are not bad in their bones. It's just that backward ideas can't keep up with the times. I only know that I can't exchange money for treasures when I dig up treasures. He didn't know anything about the protection of cultural relics. This phenomenon is not uncommon in remote rural areas, whether it's looting cultural relics or asking for a child. It's all real and what's happening. A lot of people say, a woman cannot be happy without having children. But human beings are inherently free and independent individuals. Everyone has a different way of life. And why force others to agree with you? Maybe you take it for granted. It's a fantasy for others. There are so many different voices in the world. What we need to do is not blindly obey. Instead, follow what is most truly thought in your heart.